Poor people should go to the branch. The main branch is for ladies like me. I went to deposit $100 at the main branch of a major bank and was met with such verbal abuse. This bank employee, Dora, has harassed me several times before. I've tolerated it until now, but I've finally reached my limit and decided to give Dora a taste of her own medicine. My name is Maggie, 43 years old, living a busy life with my work. I've always been fascinated by machines since I was young, studied in the engineering faculty at university, immersing myself in programming and robotics. The engineering faculty was overwhelmingly male dominated, and being a woman in such a field was often seen as unusual. But I was so engrossed in my studies that it didn't bother me. After graduation, I joined a private company and have gained various experiences leading to where I am now. Currently, the company I work for is facing its biggest crisis ever, a severe labor shortage. Originally, we were a small team, never with much leeway. But business suddenly grew, and we found ourselves drastically understaffed. Moreover, a key male employee who had been a pillar of the company resigned due to sudden illness. His departure was a significant blow as he was capable of handling a vast amount of work in a short time. We're urgently recruiting new talent, but we can't just hire anyone. We're conducting proper recruitment tests, so it will be a while before new forces join us. I keep telling myself to endure it until then, but everyone, including myself, is exhausted from the overtime work. I'm not as young as I used to be, and lately I've been feeling the strain. And amidst all this, I encountered an unbelievable person at the main branch of a major bank, a bank employee named Dora. I met Dora about a month ago, in April. I had business at the bank and stopped by the main branch. As I was walking to use the ATM, I accidentally bumped into Dora. It was just a light brush of arms, but I immediately apologized. "Are you okay? I'm sorry." But then Dora snapped. "Huh? You bump into me and then ask if I'm okay?" I admit I wasn't paying enough attention, but her response was so aggressive and rude, it was beyond belief. "Hey, isn't it normal to apologize when you've done something wrong? Come on, apologize," Dora said arrogantly, crossing her arms and glaring at me. Even though I had apologized immediately after our slight collision, I was struck by the thought that her attitude towards a customer was just too terrible. Not wanting to make a scene, I apologized again. "I'm sorry for bumping into you." But Dora just sneered at me. "Wow, you really apologized." "Do poor people have no pride?" I was infuriated by her condescending attitude. Considering how she mocked a customer over a minor bump, I thought her behavior was far too inappropriate for a bank employee and was about to complain when Jeffrey, the manager of the main branch, appeared.
"Mrs. Fisher, did Dora do something to you?"
Jeffy asked. Dora looked annoyed at Jeffy's arrival, but I explained the situation anyway. Jeffy immediately apologized after hearing my side.
"I am terribly sorry for what happened. I will make sure to properly guide her. Dora, apologize now."
Despite her defiant attitude, Dora couldn't defy her manager and reluctantly apologized. "I am very sorry," in a barely audible voice. It was clear she wasn't truly remorseful, which only fueled my anger further, but I decided to let it go since it all started from a trivial incident. However, the story didn't end there. A week later, I had to visit the bank's main branch again for a different business. Remembering Dora, I was filled with a desire not to meet her, but as soon as I entered, there she was. She hadn't forgotten me either. "Oh, it's that lady who bumped into me," she exclaimed rudely. "Hey, I got scolded by Jeffy because of you. Take responsibility." "Responsibility? When you were also at fault?" I thought as the situation turned troublesome again. Hearing Dora's loud voice, Jeffy appeared once more.
"I apologize again for my employee's rudeness. Dora, go over there,"
he said, sending her away. After finishing my business, I was curious about Dora, so I asked Jeffy, "Why does Dora behave so badly?"
That's a bit of a complicated issue,
Jeffy explained, looking quite uncomfortable.
Dora is the daughter of an executive from a company called AI Company. Since joining, she's been under the misconception that she's important, and despite our efforts to educate her, she hasn't changed much.
With that attitude, how did she even pass the recruitment exam? When I asked Jeffy for more details, his face fell with weariness.
Actually, it's a classic case of nepotism. Dora's father knows someone in the upper management of our bank. The recruitment test was conducted, but it was just a formality. Her hiring was decided from the start.
So that's how it was. Jeffy also believes that Dora is not suitable to be a bank employee, but he can't fire her on his own due to the higher-ups' decisions. I learned further that Dora was academically competent but arrogant, looking down on her classmates throughout her school life. Attending prestigious private schools for both high school and college, her attitude never changed. After quitting her first job post-university and spending time idly, her parents decided to employ her at the bank. Dora, who has been overbearing since her student days, apparently lacks even basic manners.
Whenever she deals with customers, she almost always ends up upsetting them, and we can't trust her with any responsibility.
Jeffy, lamenting this, looked utterly exhausted. Having such a troublemaker around must be constantly worrying during work hours, and I shudder to think what it would be like if I had someone like that as a subordinate. But if Dora is connected to AI company, maybe I could fight back a little. With these thoughts, I left the bank. Then yesterday, Dora did something incredibly disrespectful to me. I had stopped at a cash-only eatery during lunch and needed to withdraw money from an ATM. I was so tired that I withdrew more than necessary. I realized this only after paying for my meal. Having lost $500 once when I was new to the workforce, I have since been reluctant to carry much cash. I wanted to redeposit the excess, but time constraints made it difficult. Later that afternoon, I had another errand at the bank, so I decided to deposit the money then. I dreaded encountering Dora again, but didn't want the hassle of making extra trips. Fortunately, Dora wasn't at the ATM, but it was unusually busy that day. The counter was free, and to my relief, Dora wasn't there either. As I was taking out my wallet, which contained $200 bills and a few tens, I usually carry between $100 and $150. Just as I was about to deposit a $100 bill,
Ah, what's this?
I heard a familiar mocking voice. I turned in shock to see Dora approaching, reeking of strong perfume and in a strangely cheerful mood.
Just came back from a long lunch, and look what I found.
Interesting stuff? Sensing the ominous atmosphere, other bank employees told Dora to leave, but she ignored them and shockingly tore my $100 bill to pieces. The onlookers were speechless at her outrageous behavior.
Hey, what are you doing?
Shocked, I yelled out, and Dora laughed crudely.
Depositing such a small amount in this prestigious bank, you must be kidding. Poor people should go to the branch. The main branch is for ladies like me, you know.
Hearing this, I reached my limit of tolerance. I no longer felt the need to hold back with such a person and resolved to give Dora a taste of her own medicine. Unaware of my thoughts, Dora continued to brag.
My dad is so important, you know. He's an executive at AI company, making parts for robots and stuff.
That's great, but can you call Jeffy for me? I have something to discuss with him.
Jeffy? This seems like it's going to be a hassle, but as a service, I'll call him.
Dora, looking displeased, called Jeffy. I explained the situation as calmly as possible, and though Jeffy looked like he was about to collapse, I firmly said, I'm closing my $8 million corporate account. My voice was lower than I expected, and my speech naturally slipped into a more casual tone. Despite trying to stay calm, I felt uncontrollable anger rising within me. Taken aback by my sudden decision, Jeffy stammered,
What?
I can't trust a bank with such rude employees. I'd be fine if you fired her, but that's impossible, right? So I'm closing my account. As I said this, Jeffy began to look frightened, but but Dora was still laughing carelessly.
What's the big deal? It's just a torn $100 bill.
Jeffy, ignoring Dora's nonchalant attitude,
"Let's discuss this in the back,"
said in a trembling voice. Looking around, I noticed other customers staring at us with frozen expressions. Realizing we had caused a scene, I decided to follow Jeffy's suggestion to move the discussion. In the meeting room, Dora started belittling me again.
You came all the way to the main branch just to deposit a measly $100, right? Such a poor person doesn't belong here. I was just teaching you that.
I had a lot I wanted to say, but I decided to first address the treatment of money. No matter the amount, it's wrong to treat money carelessly, especially for a bank employee.
But it's also a banker's role to remind people of their place. Don't you think? Ding, ding, ding.
Dora joked. At that moment, Jeffrey's anger finally exploded.
"Enough! You tore someone's money and call it a warning? You are fired no matter what."
Oh, as if that's going to help. The higher-ups will scold you, won't they?
Dora, believing her father would protect her, maintained her smug expression. However, Jeffrey was not about to give up.
"No, if Mrs. Fisher closes her $8 million corporate account, even the upper management will have no choice but to fire you."
Dora looked skeptical.
$8 million? Do you really have that kind of money?
Hearing this, Jeffrey sighed heavily.
"When you joined this bank, I clearly explained that Mrs. Fisher is the CEO of the rapidly growing Super Robotech, and she holds an $8 million corporate account."
Huh? This person is a CEO? You're kidding, right?
Dora was shocked. It's true. I am the CEO of Super Robotech. Indeed, I am the CEO of Super Robotech, the company I founded after working in a private enterprise involved in robotics post-university. Initially, it was tough with just a few like-minded colleagues and tight finances, but we recently experienced rapid growth due to the success of our pet and caregiving robots. The media attention has been great, but it has made us extremely busy, and we are currently struggling with a shortage of staff. Ideally, I wouldn't even want to deal with someone like Dora. As I explained this to Dora, she seemed to realize that she had made a significant mistake and started to get flustered.
No way! So the $8 million corporate account isn't a lie? I'm so sorry!
"You realize this now? And today, Mrs. Fisher came to consult about the account. The $100 was just an afterthought."
Jeffy shouted loudly. Even the usually brazen Dora was shaken and kept apologizing.
I'm sorry, I'm really sorry.
But
if you have $8 million, what does $100 matter?
That was her true feelings slipping out. Hearing this, my anger rose further. I would have been angry even if it was just $10. It's the act of looking down on others and mishandling money that infuriates me.
But you can easily make $100, right?
Instead of apologizing sincerely, Dora continued to provoke me. Do you realize how hard it is to earn $100? My company started very small, and there was a time when making $100 in sales was a struggle. Even though we are growing rapidly, we are not yet stable, so I am careful with money. As I forcefully made my point, Dora seemed overwhelmed and her face tightened.
Yes, money is important. I'm sorry.
But it was clear she was apologizing out of fear, not understanding. You've done things that are beyond a joke, so don't think a mere apology will suffice. Unless you're fired, I won't be satisfied.
You're seriously trying to get me fired? That's a bit much.
Dora's earlier bravado was nowhere to be seen. She started to panic, but I found her attitude somewhat amusing. You're an executive's daughter, right? Your family is wealthy, so even if you get fired, you shouldn't have financial troubles.
No, that's not it. I have my own issues.
Dora interrupted me, waving her hands frantically.
Actually, just this morning, Dad warned me about my attitude at the bank. He said if I cause any more problems, he'll kick me out of the house.
Actually, I felt I had to do something, so I contacted Dora's father,
Jeffy added. Dora glared at him as if to say he had done something unnecessary. Don't look at me like that. Haven't you always caused trouble for your parents since you were a child? This was bound to happen. Dora looked down as I spoke to her sternly.
Indeed, My parents have always been worried about my bad attitude, and I lied about becoming serious to get this job at the bank.
That's why you're being abandoned. I sighed. Suddenly, Dora's face lit up with an idea.
If Dad doesn't find out I'm fired, it'll be fine. So everyone, please stick to the same story.
I was appalled by her absurd suggestion.
I'll pay you if you help me,
she offered, thinking money could sway us. However, I wasn't protesting for money and wouldn't remain silent. Instead, I shared this with her. Your father's company, AI company, does business with my company. I even had a recent opportunity to work with your father, so I've already reported your misconduct.
What?
Dora was stunned. Your actions are already well known. Why did you tear up the money, especially after your father's warning?
Well, I thought I'd get away with it. Just got carried away.
Dora struggled to find words. Suspecting she was hiding something, I moved closer and sniffed. The source of the peculiar smell became clear. Have you been drinking?
What?
Dora's voice pitched high, her shoulders trembling.
No way! I would never drink on the job.
Lying only worsens your impression, I warned. She finally admitted.
Yes, I drank at lunch. Dad threatened to throw me out, and I was under tremendous stress.
Drinking during work hours is unprofessional. Your unusual high spirits were due to alcohol, I see. I couldn't help but remark. Dora's face turned as if she was about to cry.
The alcohol has worn off. Please don't be so harsh. I only drank a little to relieve stress. I am remorseful.
Drinking at work is not acceptable, regardless of stress, I scolded. Dora felt silent, so I took the opportunity to insist on a proper apology. After all the trouble you've caused, shouldn't you apologize properly? You yourself said before, if you do something wrong, you should apologize.
You're right, Mrs. Fisher. Apologize sincerely from the bottom of your heart.
Encouraged by Jeffy, Dora apologized.
I'm truly sorry. I realize now that I went too far. I will properly compensate for the $100.
Her demeanor was genuinely humble, and her regret was evident. However, I had no intention of helping her. I will report your misconduct to the bank's upper management and strongly advocate for your dismissal. Be prepared for that. Even Dora seemed to understand that resisting further was futile.
Yes,
she nodded and then fell silent. Whatever lay ahead for her was not my concern. With these thoughts, I left the bank. Later, I learned from Jeffrey that Dora had been formally fired.
Other customers witnessed Dora tearing the money and filed numerous complaints. With the potential closure of Mrs. Fisher's corporate account, even the upper management couldn't protect her any longer.
Jeffy explained. But the story didn't end there. Someone had posted the scene of Dora tearing the money and hurling insults on social media, causing an uproar. Dora, already infamous among some customers for her bad reputation, had her full name quickly spread online. Her connection to AI company, where her father was an executive, was also uncovered, leading to numerous complaints to the company. A week later, Dora shockingly uploaded a rebuttal video on social media.
I've been kicked out of my house and lost my job. I'm too scared to go outside because of public scrutiny, making it impossible for me to look for work. How am I supposed to live in extreme poverty?
Her angry appeal to the public caused another blow-up on social media, and her address was identified from the scenery reflected in her window. But Dora, further angered by this in a video,
I've moved somewhere else,
she said. However, her new address was inadvertently revealed in the video, leading to further identification. Moreover, her act of tearing money was considered vandalism, resulting in a fine. Unable to pay due to her financial state, Dora had to accept alternative sentencing. Having become infamously known nationwide, her life would likely continue to be difficult even after completing the sentence. Meanwhile, I continue as CEO of Super Robotech. The staffing issue resolved with the arrival of competent applicants, reducing the workload on each employee and revitalizing the team. My own workload has eased, improving my efficiency and reaffirming the value of expanding the team. I'm committed to preventing severe staff shortages in the future. I didn't cancel the $8 million corporate account after receiving a formal apology from the bank. However, For easier fund management, I did transfer some money to another bank's corporate account, which was the original reason for my bank's visit that day. The bank, now free of Dora, has become a pleasant place to use again, and Jeffy seems happier too. The ordeal with Dora was challenging, but now that she's gone, I've decided to move on as quickly as possible. I'd rather focus on my passion for robotics and continue working hard for my employees and our beloved robot projects. Despite future challenges, as the CEO, I'm determined to persevere and stay involved in the robotics industry as long as possible. With these thoughts, I continue to dedicate myself to my work today.
My name is Jessica. I'm a 35-year-old office worker. Since my husband Bob, who is 2 years younger than me, was transferred, we've been temporarily living with his parents. I stress, it's only temporary. Bob seems to enjoy living in his childhood home, but I am eager to find our own place and move out as quickly as possible. This is because I simply can't get along with my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law. She was always a nasty person, even before our marriage, but after living together, her attitude is more harsh than before. "Jessica, haven't you gone shopping yet? You missed the supermarket's early bird sale. You can't even shop efficiently. Tisk, tisk." I work from home with my company's permission, but I'm still working during weekdays. There's no way I could make time for my shopping at the supermarket's early bird sale time. Mother-in-law, as I've said many times, I work during the day, so I can't go shopping until after 5 p.m. Every time I say this, my mother-in-law criticizes me. Here she goes, so arrogant. Can't even have a child. Bob and I don't have children. We haven't specifically checked at the hospital, so we don't know who is to blame. I wanted a child, but considering Bob's income, we couldn't afford the expensive fertility treatments. Even before moving in together, I was distressed by my mother-in-law's nasty remarks, but it was better when we were living separately. Living under the same roof day and night, I am exposed to her nasty remarks 24/7. My father-in-law doesn't directly make snide remarks, but he irritates me in a different way. He seems to believe that women over 30 years old are old lady, and treats me, a 35-year-old woman, as such. "Hey, old lady, get me the ashtray. Why are you wearing a skirt? No one wants to see your legs." I want to tell him, if I'm an old lady, what does that make you, who's turning 60? I'm not a pushover either, so I retort each time they make rude remarks about me. But that only leads to further deterioration of our relationship as they consider it bossy. There is always a tense atmosphere in the house, and I was already feeling the limit of living together. However, after the transfer, Bob started working more on weekends and going on more business trips, so we couldn't discuss moving out. "Jessica, I have another business trip this weekend." "Again? You just went on a business trip. This new branch seems to have a lot of business trips." Before his transfer, although he had to work overtime, there were hardly any weekend work or business trips. Can't be helped, right? The work changes with the workplace. Sure, things change when jobs change, but isn't this a bit much? Thanks to this, we are not even able to find a place to move, even though we were supposed to live with my in-laws temporarily. What if we had to live with my in-laws for a long time? I was afraid of that. But then, one day, something happened. As I was removing laundry from Bob's bag after his business trip, I found a piece of paper in his bag's pocket. It turned out to be a printout of an online booking from a travel website. I figured it was just the flight and hotel booking for his business trip, but when I read it more closely, I couldn't believe my eyes. There was a hotel reservation that included tickets to Disneyland for 2 people, and the date was yesterday. That is, the day Bob was on a business trip. Of course, Bob's company has nothing to do with Disneyland. Sure, they deal in seafood, but that's as close as they get to Disneyland. It doesn't matter. This means that Bob was pretending to go on a business trip, when in fact, he was visiting Disneyland for 2 days. And the fact that the hotel reservation was for 2 people? There's no doubt he was with a woman. As I was reeling from the shock, I heard Bob humming in the shower. It's a small world after all. The well-known theme song of a famous ride. He must have been reminiscing about Disneyland and humming unconsciously. But it seems that attractions are not important in a fun and enjoyable affair trip. I was so angry that I was ready to charge into the bathroom and confront Bob. But just then, Bob's phone rang. I was too enraged to think clearly, so I answered the call without thinking. Hello? Hello? For a moment, I heard a young woman's voice, and then the call was abruptly cut off. Could it be? I was convinced. The call just now was no doubt from the woman Bob went to Disneyland with. In other words, Bob's mistress. When she heard my voice answering Bob's phone, she must have panicked and hung up. I checked the call history on his smartphone. Bob isn't really security conscious, so he doesn't bother to set a decent password. I figured his passcode would probably be his 4-digit birth date. And bingo! The phone was unlocked in no time. But looking through his smartphone made my head spin. Evidence of his infidelity was pouring out of it, unmistakable and overwhelming. The image files were full of selfies of him and a young woman. The dates the photos were taken were all days when Bob had been on business trips or working on his days off. I was amazed at his recklessness, even leaving pictures of their intimate moments. Looking at the call history again, I saw the name Melissa Smith, so I searched for the same name in his WhatsApp friends list and opened the chat screen. Bob, I love you. I want to be your wife soon. This woman, Melissa, seems to be hoping to marry Bob. A homewrecker, perhaps? As I was mulling this over, Bob came out of the bathroom. Ah, that's refreshing. Facing Bob, who came out nonchalantly, drying his hair with a towel, I confronted him right away. Refreshed, huh? Seems like you're feeling pretty refreshed in a lot of ways. Huh? Who is Melissa Smith? At the mention of his mistress's name, Bob flinched. So it's true. You've been lying about going on business trips, and instead, you've been going on trips alone with this woman, Melissa Smith? Were all your business trips and working days off just lies? Unforgivable. Why do you... How on earth? I pointed my smartphone at the upset Bob. All the evidence is right here in this smartphone. Hey, did you go snooping through my phone? That's a violation of my privacy. It's laughable that a man who's morally bankrupt enough to cheat can complain about privacy invasion. If you don't want it looked at, set a better password. Before we got married, I made a promise with Bob that he'd absolutely not cheat. I had declared to Bob that if he cheated, I'd leave him right away. Of course, my feelings haven't changed. I can't continue a marital life with a man who's playing around with another woman. Let's get a divorce. When I simply said that, Bob surprisingly agreed without objection. Yeah, I guess so. It was unexpected. I thought he would resist more. Was he ready for divorce once he was caught cheating? I'll get the divorce papers tomorrow. You tell your mom and dad. Got it. Bob's agreement was astonishingly nonchalant. However, once a declaration has been issued, it cannot be withdrawn, and it has no intention of doing so. Is this goodbye to married life? I felt a tinge of loneliness. The next day, I left the house early in the morning to get the divorce papers from the city office and to take care of some other errands. By the time I got home, it was already late at night. There in the house, my husband and his parents were waiting for me. So you finally come back. We were wondering how long you were going to wander around. The moment she saw me, my mother-in-law began to make snide remarks. Bob being present here means she should already know about Bob's cheating and our divorce. Isn't there something she should say, like an apology, before making a snide comment? But instead of an apology, my mother-in-law said something unbelievable. Well, it doesn't matter. At least you're finally leaving. We don't want to see your face anymore, so it's just as well you've been gone all day. What do you mean? With a smug smile, my mother-in-law responded to my question. Exactly as I said. I'm sick and tired of seeing your face. Finally, Bob has returned home, and you were just in the way. You're always back talking, without any hint of charm, even when I tried to make you uncomfortable enough to leave. It took so long for you to get the hint. I finally had to resort to my ace in the hole. Ace in the hole? My mother-in-law gave a satisfied smile. You already know the name of Bob's girlfriend, right? Yes, something like Smith? Why was she checking if I knew the name of Bob's mistress? You see, I have a friend from my book club, Mrs. Smith. Her daughter is such a well-mannered, charming young lady. She's 10 years younger than you, only 25. At that age, she can have kids easily. Then my mother-in-law dropped a bomb. So I introduced Mrs. Smith's daughter to Bob. Excuse me? I was shocked. I never expected my mother-in-law to say something like this to me. Are you saying, mother-in-law, you arranged Bob's affair? Oh, arranged sounds so scandalous. I simply introduced them. I was completely taken aback by my mother-in-law, proudly talking about her own wrongdoings. I can't believe that a mother would induce her own son to cheat on her. And she is so proud to tell her son's wife about it. What a horrible mother. Well, I had no other choice. Bob is our only child. We need an heir. I would have even accepted you as my daughter-in-law if you'd had children. But all you did was work, never having any children. Next to my mother-in-law, my father-in-law also nodded in agreement. So he was aware of his wife's actions. Do you understand? A 35-year-old woman who can't even have kids is no longer needed. If you understand, then hurry up and leave. With a triumphant look, my mother-in-law pointed at me. After a moment of silence, I said, I see. I understand your views very clearly. I'll leave as you wish. I'll take all my belongings with me. Oh, please do. I doubt you have much to take with you anyway. Do you need help moving? My mother-in-law laughed and said, even though she didn't know anything. But I was the one who would have the last laugh. No, it's fine. Don't worry about me. Everything's already arranged. Huh? Since I wasn't crying or freaking out, my mother-in-law looked surprised. Besides, mother-in-law, I already know that you were helping Bob cheat on me. What? I smirked at my mother-in-law. What do you think I've been doing all day? If I just went to the city hall to get divorce papers, it wouldn't have taken this long. I spent all day arranging for a move and meeting with Melissa Smith. Oh my God. You met with Melissa? Bob asked me in a panic. So what? Did you think I would let you cheat behind my back and not say a word to the other woman? I made sure to note down her phone number when I checked your phone yesterday, I said calmly. Poor Melissa, though. She was really surprised when I called her and said, I'm Bob's wife. I'd like to meet with you. Apparently, you've been lying to her, saying that you're single. I told her the whole truth. Bob, my mother-in-law, and my father-in-law were all shocked. They never would have thought I'd pull something like this off in just one day. Melissa found out that she was the other woman in your affair, and she was really upset. Of course, Mrs. Smith was furious too, at Bob and at you, mother-in-law. She was talking about suing you both for marriage fraud. I couldn't help but sympathize with her, so I promised I'd help as much as I could. What? Bob was visibly shaken. Of course, my mother-in-law was in the same state. Given the many ways in which Melissa deserves sympathy, I've decided not to claim any compensation from her. Instead, I'll increase the amount I claim from you, Bob, and you, mother-in-law, and father-in-law. Compensation? Why the hell do we have to pay damages? My father-in-law blurted out in panic. It's one thing if it's just Bob, but we have nothing to do with this. He seemed to have expected his son to pay some compensation for his affair, but they never dreamt that they themselves would pay. Are you going to take the best part without getting hurt? There's no such thing. Of course you do. The emotional distress caused by your harassment is more than enough reason, don't you think? As I said this with a smile, my father-in-law fell silent. And have you forgotten what I do for a living? I work at a law firm. Why don't I consult with my boss, the attorney, and see just how much we can squeeze out of you in compensation. I had already informed my attorney at the firm about the situation. Wha? Then the sound of a car pulling up in the driveway was heard. Oh, they're here. Hey there, this is a moving service. I headed to the door with a warm smile on my face. Thanks for having you come at late time. Sorry for the sudden request. No problem. We had a spot open for the night shift. It actually worked out for me as well. I managed to get some other things done, so please get started right away. Oh, and be careful. There are some fragile items. As I invited them in, several movers began to shuffle into the house and start gathering the belongings. Wait! Hold on! Following my instructions, they began to pack up my things with a swift and efficient rhythm. Not just my clothes, books, and computer, but even the appliances in the living room and kitchen. Hey, you guys, don't take that. That's ours. No. I brought everything here when we moved in. They're all mine. When Bob and I first moved here, because of his job transfer, all the appliances in the in-laws' house were old ones that they'd been using for ages. I couldn't bear it and had our appliances shipped over from our previous apartment. Now it seemed that my mother-in-law had gotten used to the latest appliances and mistaken them for her own. A robotic vacuum and cordless cleaner. A high-end oven range capable of various cooking methods. An induction cooktop. A negative ion hairdryer, and an espresso machine. You're taking everything? You greedy woman! Mother-in-law lunged at me, but Bob stopped her. Mom, it can't be helped. But... It's all Jessica's. It seemed that Bob had accepted the situation. However, it seemed that my mother-in-law wasn't ready to give up just yet. Once you know the superiority of the latest appliances, you can't go back, right? If you're dissatisfied, why don't you buy new ones? Though, after paying the compensation, it seems unlikely that you'll have enough money to buy new high-end appliances. While this was going on, the movers were rapidly moving my stuff into their truck under my direction. They bowed to me and hopped into the truck. Okay, I'll be heading to the new address as well. Please make sure everything gets there. As I watched the moving truck drive off, I got into my car. Of course, this car is also mine. Where is that truck going? Bob asked. Huh? Of course, I'm taking it to my apartment. The one I lived in before you were transferred. My apartment. The apartment I bought when I was single was listed for sale with a realtor due to Bob's job transfer. However, because the asking price was too high, it never sold, and I still own it. The realtor suggested lowering the price several times, but I'm glad I didn't. I never imagined this would happen. As I fastened my seatbelt, I laughed softly. But maybe, just maybe, I predicted this would happen deep down. What? Bob made a face as if he didn't understand. Because I set a selling price higher than the market rate to make sure it wouldn't sell. This way, I could always move back to my apartment. Upon hearing my words, Bob seemed to crumble from the knees. You, such a bitch! Feeling sure of my victory and letting my guard down, I was suddenly shoved by my mother-in-law, who rushed at me yelling. As I groaned in pain, my mother-in-law attempted to throw a cutting board at me for a follow-up attack, but was suddenly tackled by a black object and fell down yelling, "Ah!" Thank you, Blackie. Holding the black object, a stray cat named Blackie, I got in the moving truck and hurried to my new place to escape from my mother-in-law. I don't know why Blackie, the stray cat, was there at that moment, but I'm sure he came to help me because he has a strong sense of justice. I'll give him some catnip as a gift later. After that, Bob and I divorced. The law firm I work at filed a lawsuit for compensation against Bob and his parents. It's a real blessing that the young lawyers in training at the office accepted my case for almost no fee at all. Even though a young new lawyer is in charge, I feel secure because they have the support of a senior lawyer. As for the lawsuit against Melissa Smith, the senior lawyer himself took on the case, not the trainees. He said he will file both criminal and civil lawsuits because of the high degree involved. He said he's excited to file a criminal lawsuit as it's been a long time since he's done so. Even if they sell their house and pay to Melissa Smith and to me, it probably won't be enough. Thinking about the life of extreme poverty and debt waiting for the three of them, I can't help but grin. I'm alone now, but compared to living with those in-laws and my disloyal husband, it's like heaven. For a while, I want to enjoy the easy single life with Blackie, who I inadvertently brought to my apartment.
Wouldn't it have been embarrassing to have a painting like that on the front porch? My daughter-in-law Macy, who had sold my prized painting on a flea market app without my permission, stated flatly. My mother had done a colored pencil drawing of Gerberas for me from her hospital bed before she died. That drawing was a memento of my late mother. I know, but I can't hang an amateur drawing because it's too shabby. Do you think you should talk to me like that, even though you are my daughter-in-law? I said boldly, but Macy was unfazed. She drew her arms across her chest and stared at me. Please consider your position. We will be taking care of you in the future, right? It's that deciding line again. So you're allowed to sell my belongings without my permission? I'm your one and only son's wife. Think about how much we are going to take care of you. Macy gave me one more look before walking out the door, her luxury brand shoes clacking. I'd be moving into a new house alone the next day. Macy knew this and sold the painting to harass me. Henry, my son, and Macy, my daughter-in-law, had sold my belongings without my permission before. I was furious but resigned to the fact that I would never get them back. But I'll never forgive her for selling my mother's mementos. Both Macy and Henry, who was always at her disposal, irritate me. I'll completely cut ties from my son and wife when I move into my new house tomorrow. My husband, son, and wife can live in this old house. I am Amy, a 50-year-old housewife. For years, I did all of the housework while working part-time at a factory. I look after my family, which includes my husband, my only son, and as of 3 years ago, my daughter-in-law, Macy. My mother, who raised me as a single mother, died 6 months ago. She left me a large sum of money from her life insurance policy. I took advantage of the opportunity to purchase a small, new house and decided to divorce my husband, with whom I had a strained relationship. The day before I moved in, Macy sold my mother's painting without my permission. When I told my husband we were splitting up, he simply said, "Do whatever you want." During our many years as a couple, our relationship had cooled. I believe neither of us did anything wrong and that what happened was unavoidable. My son and his wife, who lived with us, were the ones who were against my leaving. Who will do the housework if you leave? Aren't you a housewife? I am a civil servant like Henry, so I am not like you who only works part-time. It's appalling to hear a mother throw her family out of the house. My son and his wife both continued to complain as I was packing. First and foremost, why are you buying a house now? It's the money my mother left me, and it's up to me what I do with it. When the insurance money arrives, you should put it to good use for your family. A house where you'll live alone is a squandering of money. She's right. You should have shared grandmother's insurance money with us. Henry's wife was a brand-obsessed woman who never washes a single pair of underwear and is constantly taking dance, yoga, English conversation, and other classes. My son, who is at her beck and call, blames me all at the same time. This was enough for me. My friend Jane, who lives near my new house, invited me over the night I moved in to join her for dinner. My husband is out drinking today too, so I thought it would be perfect. Thank you very much. I still haven't unpacked anything. Jane's house is magnificent. She and her husband both love dogs, so they built a house to accommodate a large dog. In fact, 3 Dobermans are currently resting quietly in the living room's corner. I told Jane about Henry and Macy while eating a hamburger she had prepared for me. What's the deal with your daughter-in-law? And I'm sorry, but your son is also pitiful. Henry used to be a stronger person, but now he's at the mercy of his wife. I'm tired of it. One of the large dogs approached me and nuzzled my feet, as if to console me. It was Hannah, the female of the 3 Dobermans. Hannah is much gentler than my son. All of our dogs are smart and good. Jane used to be a trainer because she's so good with dogs. Her 3 new dogs are large and scary in appearance, but are really gentle and extremely intelligent. They would never attack anyone, but they will bark at uninvited guests if Jane instructs them to. I wish I had a dog as gentle as Hannah is. Why don't you get yourself one? I'll train it for you. Indeed, I am free to do whatever I want as of today. In a new house, you begin a new life. Isn't that right? I thought so too. Macy and I are moving to my parents' house next month. At the end of the month, my son called me with this news. I'd just gotten used to living alone and was starting to enjoy my independence. Your parents' house? Oh, you're moving to Macy's parents' house? No, it's my mother's house. My home? You already live at your father's house. I wasn't sure what he was saying. I talked with Macy. After all, my parents' house is my mother's house, not my father's, and we decided to move to your house. No, my house isn't big enough for the 3 of us. I was not going to put up with Henry and Macy bossing me around and making me do all of the housework. But one of the rooms does have a place to sleep. You can sleep in the living room corner, and we can use that space as our bedroom. Don't be ridiculous. What are you talking about? You want me to sleep in the living room corner? I could feel my face getting hot with rage. We're coming even if you don't like it. I'll start by shipping you a couple of boxes. I'm not going to accept them. Well, then I'll think of something. Anyway, I'm coming, so please, look after me, Henry said, and abruptly hung up the phone. I don't want this. I despise the idea of Henry and Macy bossing me around and forcing me to do all the housework. That is something I will not allow to happen. The next day, Jane and I went to a family restaurant. I wanted her to listen to my story. I'm sorry, but you have the worst son and daughter-in-law. As she sipped her latte, Jane continued, You must not accept it under any circumstances. You must politely say no. Well, since it is those 2, they might hire a moving company. I don't know what to do. To wash down my pitiful feelings, I drank a sip of jasmine tea. I enjoy this tea, but it is quite bitter. Well, it is difficult to say no when the movers will come. If we're not careful, we might get into trouble. We have to do something to make them not want to come to my house. I can't stand the way they're acting. Well, we could ask my children for help. What, Hannah and the dogs? Hannah, Sun, and Sky are Jane's 3 kids, her 3 beloved Dobermans. My dogs will bark, growl, and act out to some extent on command. I could ask them to scare them away or something. In fact, my son has been afraid of dogs since he was a child. It's difficult to live with a son and his wife who would sell their mother's mementos without permission. So let's come up with something. I agree. Thank you very much, Jane. I felt a little relieved as a result of our conversation. When I returned home, I discovered that my son and his wife were serious. 2 large cardboard boxes had been stacked in front of the front door. These are Henry's and my possessions. We thought you would refuse the courier, so I brought them. We will move in next month, so please keep them in the house. Macy. My shoulders slumped as I read the note attached to the cardboard box. I had no choice but to bring the box inside, and when I opened it, I discovered many of their personal belongings. Henry's imported watches and leather jackets. Macy's designer bags, clothes, and shoes. They must have left behind valuable items I would not discard without permission. What a dirty move. How little they must think of me to sell off my mother's paintings or leave this luggage without my permission. Well, we could ask my children for help. Jane's voice from the family restaurant came to mind. I've occasionally accompanied Jane on dog walks since I settled in after the move. She invites me to accompany her for a change of scenery. She's a great friend to have. It means a lot to me. Why don't you sell their belongings? Macy would sell them on her own, wouldn't she? Yes, even the memento my mother painted. Moon, a male dog, looks at me from the end of the leash I am holding. By the way, why do your son and wife want to live with you? They're both government employees and have money, so why don't they just live together? They don't like doing housework, especially Macy because she's always learning, going out to play, or watching fashion and makeup videos. So you've been doing all the housework by yourself? Yes, my husband never did it, and Henry works overtime and travels a lot, and Macy is the same way. I recall hearing a conversation between my son and his wife on the day I announced my departure from our home. If you leave the house, who will do the housework? Well, you can. No, obviously not. I want your mother to do it. Jane sighed in disgust when I mentioned this. It wasn't until a week later that I received several phone calls from Macy. I finally answered in disgust after she phoned dozens of times. Your house is quite small, right? Yes, that's what I said. Henry said he saw you with 3 big dogs, and I wonder if 3 dogs like that could live in a small house. It struck me. Macy is obviously terrified of dogs. There are people all over the world who are terrified of dogs. One of them is Henry. Jane must have been with me when Henry saw her, but he must have been completely distracted by the dogs. I told you it's a small house. If you're worried, why don't you come back and take a look? I will. I want to check the inside of the house. Macy's voice unraveled a little. She decided that there was no dog in the house. Anyway, I'll be there this Sunday at 10 a.m., Macy said and hung up the phone. Okay. Unexpectedly, I can take my revenge now. On Sunday, Henry and Macy came to my house as planned. You really came? I said I would come. You know, it's because you bought the house on a whim that we're in this messy situation. That's really true. You should have stayed quiet and continued to do the housework like before. Complaining, they took off their shoes and entered the house. Okay, that's it. I opened the living room door, gloating in my mind. Whoa! Ah! The next moment, my son and his wife screamed in unison. There were 2 Dobermans, Moon and Sky, sitting there. What? Are you kidding me? Mother, this dog. These are my dogs. Aren't they cute? Jane, the dog trainer over there, found them for me. Jane, who was sitting on the sofa, stood up and smiled at me. They are so cute because they are well trained. Moon, Sky, how do you say hello to our guests? The dogs barked at the same time. Macy said, "Oh no!" Macy sat down with her head in her hands. Is she that bad with dogs? Oh, they are so cute. Don't worry, Moon, Sky, play with them. At the sound of Jane's voice, the 2 dogs ran over to Henry and Macy, respectively. They raised their paws, wagging their tails as if to say, "Let's play." Stop! Oh no, I'm scared! Macy shook her head and began to wriggle and shake. Moon just invited her to play with him, but Macy doesn't understand. I'm scared of dogs. Macy just lost it and burst into tears, snot running out of her nose. Oh dear, if you're going to live in my house, you'll have to get along with these kids too. Make them stop! This ruined the makeup she had studied on YouTube and was so proud of. Her mascara was running and the lame from her eyeshadow spread to her cheeks. Her tears and runny nose made the high-end foundation look soggy. With this face, she was going to take the train home. Hey, Mom, do something about it. Meanwhile, Henry, who had been jostled by the much larger Sky, fell on his backside and began to scoot away. Sky, thinking that he was playing, happily jumped on Henry. No, stop it. The dog is too big and scary. I suddenly looked at Henry's jeans and saw that the color of his crotch had darkened a bit. He was so afraid of the dog that he had peed himself. How pathetic. Moon, Sky, come here. Jane decided it was time to stop and called the dogs. Immediately, the two dogs left Henry and Macy and returned to her. Moon, Sky, down. With that one word, the dogs lay down at Jane's feet. They really are smart kids. Until now, even though I've been slaving away at my part-time job and housework, you've never helped me. Besides, when I said I was going to leave, you decided to live on your own. Do you think your mother is stupid? I spat out the words I had been holding back as my son and his wife stood up, crying. I left home because I was fed up with you. I am not your housekeeper. But doesn't that mean you have to? He's a well-trained and smart dog, and much gentler than you. Henry and Macy lacked their usual air of bravado. A husband with a wet crotch and a wife whose makeup is a mess. They make the perfect couple. You also sold off my precious things without my permission. I will never forgive you for selling my mother's painting. I said it at once and looked at Moon and Sky, who were meekly lying face down, before looking at my son and his wife again. This, a house with 2 dogs this big, is something we don't want. That's right, we'll give up moving. So give me back the stuff we left behind the other day, then we'll go home. They're still in the boxes in the next room. Take it and get out of here. As I pointed to the next room, Henry and Macy took a wide turn to avoid the dog before opening the door. And... whoa! Ah! They both screamed again and fell on their butts. That's right, because another Doberman, Hannah, was sitting right next to the boxes in the room. Mom, the boxes. Please get them. I don't want to. You brought it yourself, so take it yourself. I peeked into the room and saw Hannah just sitting there with a calm expression on her face. I can't go near a dog like that. Then give up your stuff. You mean I should leave it? My bags and Henry's watches are in that box. You also got rid of my precious things without my permission, didn't you? I didn't ask you to leave them behind. I'm telling you, take it with you. Macy just glared at me for a moment. But then, perhaps remembering the dog's presence, she lowered her eyes with a sigh. Please, Mother, bring us the boxes. You and Macy have been making fun of me. You knew how important that painting that she sold off was to me, but you didn't stop her. Well, I'm sorry about that, but... At that time, Jane came to me. Hannah, how do we greet our guests? Immediately, Hannah sat down and barked loudly. No! Stop it! Hearing Hannah's voice, the son and his wife must have reached their limit. With his wet jeans and her face covered in smudged makeup, they ran to the front door and got out of the house. After that, I sold all the personal belongings Henry and Macy had left behind to a pawn shop. I discovered that their belongings were of considerable luxury, with Henry's watch having a surprisingly high value and Macy's bag being of a particularly high class. The extravagance of these items left me in a state of dismay. Back at her house, Macy ended up being responsible for all the household chores. My former husband does not like Macy's housework. He constantly complains that the food is bad, the house is dirty, and the laundry is piled up. Macy can no longer go to her lessons because of her housework, and she has gained 10 kilograms due to the stress. And all of her frustration seems to be directed at Henry. Mom, I'm at my limit. Macy finally started hitting me. She's been fighting with Dad all the time. I want a divorce. One day, Henry called me, his voice exhausted. You chose your own wife, didn't you? You can take care of yourself. Of course, I would not give advice to Henry. I was sick and tired of being involved with that couple. Meanwhile, I bought a female Shiba Inu and asked Jane to train her. She's going to be a great dog. Jane smiled as she patted the head of the puppy I named Rio. Really, it's all thanks to you. I'm sorry for making the dogs play such an unpleasant role. That's okay. When I heard what you said, I was more upset than you were. But from now on, you and Rio can live together peacefully. Yes, from now on, I will enjoy my life and my time. With this determination in my heart, I gently picked up the puppy.
After coming home from a week-long honeymoon, we heard strange noises coming from inside the house. We were worried that it might be a burglar. Do you hear that? Someone might be in the house. Should we call the police? My husband, unfazed, said, "It's fine," and walked inside. I followed him in a hurry and found mother-in-law and sister-in-law inside. Relieved it wasn't a burglar. I still couldn't understand why they were in our house. Apparently, they had taken the keys from my husband to look after the house while we were gone. We thought they would leave once we returned, but they showed no signs of doing so. It's getting dark. Time for you to go. Oh, can't we stay a bit longer? Not only they did not leave, but they also took over the living room and started using our bathroom. I thought they would surely leave the next day, but even when I came back from work, they were still there. I couldn't take it anymore. I asked my husband to make them leave. He replied, "We're all living here now. If you don't like it, you can leave." "All right," I said. Packed a suitcase with essentials and left the house. My name is Adeline, and I am 29 years old, magazine editor. I met my now husband Dave 3 years ago through a friend. With little dating experience, I was drawn to Dave, who was decisive and took the lead. He confessed his feelings, and after dating for 3 years, we got married. Whether choosing a new home or a wedding venue, he was dependable and made things run smoothly. Life was good with him, but I'd been stressed with mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Dave's father passed away 10 years ago, so it's just mother-in-law and sister-in-law who is 27. We kept our distance before the wedding, but now they become more intrusive. Mother-in-law calls almost every day asking us to increase her monthly allowance. "Even $200 would be fine," she pleads. Since Dave is the only providing the money, I tell her to talk to him, but she blames me for not being able to increase the allowance. I also get lectured about not visiting their house often enough for cleaning and other duties. On top of that, sister-in-law visits us unannounced, usually when I'm cooking dinner.
"Just making food? I'm hungry, so hurry up,"
she says, sitting on the sofa and eating dinner before leaving. Even after telling her to inform us before coming, nothing changed. Since they're Dave's family, I didn't strongly refuse expecting Dave to step in for me, but that hasn't happened. 6 months into our marriage, Dave and I finally had a chance to go on our long-delayed honeymoon. Our destination was Europe, where we unwound and enjoyed ourselves to the fullest, free from our usual stress. When we got home after a week of bliss, we heard noises inside the house. I felt a pang of fear, thinking a burglar might have broken in while we were away. "Do you hear that too? There might be someone inside. Should we call the cops?" Dave, unfazed, replied, "We're fine," and walked into the house. I hurried in after him and found my mother-in-law and sister-in-law inside. Relieved that it wasn't a burglar, I was still puzzled about why they were there.
Oh, you're back.
Welcome home. Where are my souvenirs? Did you get the bracelet I asked for?
There's no way we bought that. It's too expensive.
As I stood there, stunned, the three of them continued their animated conversation. Why are you guys here? You're annoyed we're here, aren't you? Houses are vulnerable when empty. We stayed to protect your home. You should be thankful. Apparently, mother-in-law and sister-in-law had gotten the keys from Dave to house sit while we were away. I whispered to Dave, "You should have consulted me first." He responded,
They offered to watch the place last minute. I didn't have time to consult you.
I decided to let it go, figuring their presence had at least deterred burglars. But when I looked around, every room was a mess. Sister-in-law's clothes filled our closet. Items were strewn all over the living room floor. The living room was littered not only on the table, but also on the floor with all kinds of things, including clothes, bags, remote controls, and comic books. It was exhausting to think about clearing up, especially after traveling, but that wasn't even the main issue. Despite our return, mother-in-law and sister-in-law showed no signs of leaving. It's getting late. You should head home. We're family. Why bother about formalities? Sister-in-law said, continuing to make themselves at home. I had hoped they'd leave the next day, but even after I returned from work, they were still there. I made it clear they needed to go, but they insisted. We're family, so don't bother about us. I was still doing all the cooking, cleaning, and laundry. So, Dave and I decided we have to ask them to leave when he got home. While cleaning the rooms, I noticed one of my perfumes was missing. It was a limited edition perfume that is not available now and cost over $300. So it was something I used to cherish little by little. In a rush, I asked my mother-in-law, and she had no idea about the perfume. When I confronted my sister-in-law, she said, "Oh, I have that," and pulled the perfume out of her bag. But almost none of it was left. I had been saving it, and at least 60% was supposed to be left. It smells good, doesn't it? My friend said so too, so I lent it to them. She said it so casually without any remorse that I finally lost my temper. Why are you using it without asking? What you're doing is theft. Did anyone teach you not to steal? Seriously? I just borrowed it. Why are you making such a big deal? If you only borrowed it, will you give it back? Fine, but I used some. So half the price should be okay, right? I don't want money. I want the same item back. Wow, you're pretty. It's just perfume. I know your brand. It's not that expensive. Saying that, she checked the price on her phone. What? Why is this so expensive? Spending $300 on perfume is stupid. If it's so important, lock it up. She seemed flustered, realizing it was more expensive than she thought. It was important, so I only use it at home. I never thought I have a thief as a relative who'd barge in and use my things. Don't call me a thief for using some perfume. While we were arguing, Dave came home.
What's all this noise?
Listen, bro, I use a bit of her perfume, and she's calling me a thief. Leaving the loud sister-in-law in the living room, I explained everything to Dave in the bedroom. I can't take it anymore. Kick mother-in-law and sister-in-law out!
Don't get so mad. I hadn't told you yet, but we're all going to leave here now.
I was stunned by the unexpected news.
Our old house is falling apart. We were debating repairs or moving. Living here saves money, and we have room.
Why didn't you consult me? Don't I contribute to the mortgage?
Mom already started selling the old house. We're all living here. If you don't like it, leave.
I felt my affection for Dave cooling at his unilateral decision. Understood. With that, I began packing only the essentials into my suitcase. Dave didn't stop me. Instead, he said,
Running away after a fight is childish,
and returned to the living room. Mother-in-law and sister-in-law smirked as they watched me pack. As soon as I stepped out the door, they locked it behind me. I had no intention of ever going back to that house, so I felt nothing about leaving. I stayed at a hotel and contacted my boss, so I often consult with, to take a few days off. During that break, I found a new place to live and informed my parents that I had moved out because my mother-in-law and sister-in-law had moved in, and Dave told me to leave. I also told my worried parents that I planned to divorce Dave. The only message I received from Dave during this time was an email saying, "You can come back if you repent. They both said they'd forgive you." When I told Dave over the phone that I wanted a divorce, he first responded, "You're divorcing me over this? Can't you just put up with it a little longer?" But when he realized I was serious, he agreed to the divorce. Things progressed smoothly after that, and the divorce was finalized within a few days. I wanted to end things quickly and sever ties, so I left the house the day without any division of assets. Although we had been married for less than a year, the divorce led to concerned questions from friends and those around me. The old me might have said, "It's nothing," and kept quiet. But I was over it and told everyone what had happened. Everyone was sympathetic and supportive, so I'm glad I spoke up. Living alone now, I no longer have to spend time on household chores and can focus more on work. I came up with 3 times the usual number of projects and even offered support to those who were struggling. Though my boss was concerned for me, I was grateful to throw myself into work, as being alone would bring back painful memories and make me wonder if I was also at fault. About 5 months after the divorce, Dave called. I had left most of my belongings at the house, so I thought the call might be about disposing of them and answered. At first, he asked things like, "What are you doing now? And are you living alone?" Avoiding the main topic. Although Dave is the kind of person who gets grumpy if you don't get to the point, I had to bring it up because time was precious. "Why did you call?" "I want to get back together." I had no intentions of reconciling, so when I tried to hang up, Dave hurriedly stopped me. "Wait, there's something else I have to say." "What? I'm busy, so make it quick." "Can you lend me some money? I'm having a hard time with the mortgage payments." Though the mortgage was challenging for Dave alone, it wasn't an amount he couldn't afford on his income. It turned out that Dave thought he'd get a raise soon and would be able to maintain the house even after the divorce. However, the raise didn't happen, and he was told future raises would be difficult, so he decided to quit and find a new job. He thought he'd easily find a job with better conditions, but could only find places offering less pay than his previous job. "I can't lend you any money. Please don't call me again." "You're still single, right? No one's going to marry an older woman with a divorce history, so you're better off getting back together with me." Feeling demeaned by his comment, I responded, "No, thank you," and I hung up the phone. I wondered why I ever liked such a person and felt disappointed in my lack of judgment. And so not just from Dave, but also from mother-in-law and sister-in-law, the calls kept coming. From what I gathered through their calls, they assumed Dave must be earning well since we bought a new house and had a grand wedding reception. They thought I was the one preventing Dave from giving them more money because he himself said he couldn't afford it. So they believed that if I were out of the picture, they could live comfortably. Turns out, Dave's salary was less than they expected, and they panicked, hence the frequent calls. While it's common to think that men earn more than women, I actually make more than Dave. I wanted to block their calls, but Dave knew where I worked. I was afraid they might call or even show up at my workplace, so I answered the phone once in a while. The conversations were always about money. He'd say things like, "They both are spending too much and drain our savings," or "They both started part-time jobs, but they're still not making ends meet." I thought if I told them I was also broke, the calls would stop. So one day, as usual, they said, "We need money for upcoming bills." I responded, "Actually, I'm leaving my current job. I'm pretty much depleted my savings. I need money more than you do. If you don't believe me, ask my coworkers." After hearing this, Dave said, "I see," and hung up. As planned, the calls from the 3 of them stopped. When I talked about this with a mutual friend, he told me Dave's situation was worse than I'd heard. Turns out, the salary at Dave's new job is less than his previous one, and most of it goes to the mortgage. Not just that, sister-in-law had an affair with her manager and was fired when the manager's wife found out. At first, sister-in-law claimed she didn't know he was married, but it turned out she knew his wife was pregnant. The manager and his wife are divorcing, and it's now public knowledge that sister-in-law caused it. She hasn't found a new job and has lost friends. Dave is paying off loans and barely making ends meet. Mother-in-law keeps complaining that their friends have grandchildren, while her children are single and broke, leading to daily arguments. Our friend said,
Dave thinks he's unattractive since the divorce, but he looks so run down and older than his age. There's no way he's getting any attention.
Because I share the reasons for our divorce, this friend is the only person still speaking to Dave. He tells me everything because he has no one else to talk to. This is the friend who introduced me to Dave. I feel responsible for introducing you too.
And besides, hearing about Dave's life is sort of entertaining,
he said. He's also making sure Dave doesn't get near me again. As for me, I recently co-founded a web magazine company with some old friends from school. I left my job and used up most of my savings to start this company. Even though running a small business means I have to handle a lot of things on my own, it's exciting to continually take on new challenges. I used to be hesitant about diving into new things, but thanks to various experiences, I've gained the resilience to overcome hurdles. I've also started a relationship with someone I met through work. He's the kind of person who respects my feelings while taking the lead, and meeting him helped me realize that Dave wasn't a leading man, but simply self-centered. After my divorce, I thought for a few months that I couldn't possibly remarry or even date again. But now, I can think positively and want to cherish the happiness in this new chapter of my life.
Why didn't you come to Mom's funeral, sis?
What?
I never thought you were such a terrible person.
I was at a loss when my younger brother suddenly said this to me over the phone. But there was no sign of lying in his sobbing voice. James, Mom passed away 5 years ago, you know? My name is Jessica, a 30-year-old office worker. I'm dating a man named Robert, and we've just started seeing each other. He's serious about marrying me and wants to meet my parents soon. But I feel guilty about that. That's because my parents divorced a long time ago, and both of them have already passed away. My father and mother reached an irreparable state due to misunderstandings, and they ended up divorcing. At that time, I was 16. And after the divorce, I was taken in by my father. Even after the divorce, my father cared for me very much and allowed me to do anything I wanted. Thanks to him, I was able to continue learning the piano, which I had been doing since I was young and even attended cram school. In return, I did my best with the household chores, as long as it didn't interfere with my studies. I tried to cook dinner as much as possible, and although it was mostly rice balls, I prepared lunch for my father.
The rice balls you make are always delicious, Jessica.
I remember being happy when my father praised me like that. Then I went on to college. I worked hard in my studies, so I was able to get into a fairly prestigious university.
Jessica, you did a great job. Going to a higher level university than your father and mother is amazing.
I was very happy to see my father's joyful face. By the way, my father told me it was okay to see my mother, so I visited her regularly. Ah, big sister. James, long time no see.
Jessica, have you been well?
Yeah, how about you and James, Mom?
I'm fine, and James has more energy than he knows what to do with.
After the divorce, my mother lived with my younger brother, James. James is 7 years younger than me, and he was 11 when I decided to go to college. My elementary school-aged brother still had an innocent look, and he always looked very happy to see me. I was sad not to live with my brother, but I was happy to see him healthy and well when we met regularly.
Jessica, you got into college?
And it's a pretty tough one, isn't it? That's amazing. Sis, you're awesome. Thank you both.
Let's go out for steak to celebrate today. Really? Yay!
Wow, steak!
Even though my parents were divorced, I had a good relationship with my mother and brother, and I always felt happy when I saw them. But after I started college, my mother remarried another man. Since then, it became difficult to see my brother.
My husband wants me to get used to our life together, so he doesn't want me to see my previous family too much.
Is that so? I felt mixed emotions when my mother told me this over the phone. Of course, I don't mind, and I'm very happy that my mother has remarried and found happiness. But I don't want to lose the opportunity to see my brother. Can't we just reduce the frequency of our meetings?
I'm sorry, but James is entering adolescence, and I don't want to confuse him too much.
I see.
But once we get used to our new life, I'm sure my husband will let us meet.
Yeah, I understand. I wasn't really convinced, but I didn't want to protest and risk ruining my mother and brother's relationship with their new father, so I decided to endure it. After that, I finished college and got a job. During that time, I couldn't see my brother or mother. It's been 4 years. They could let me see them at least once. No, maybe they're living such fulfilling lives that they don't need to see me anymore. My brother, who was 11 at the time, is now 15. I want to send some encouragement to my brother, who is preparing for private high school entrance exams. With that thought, I bravely called my mother. Then I heard an unfamiliar man's voice.
Hello, who is this?
Isn't this my mother's number?
Are you Jessica by any chance?
Yes.
I'm David, the man who remarried your mother. She is busy right now, so I answered the phone.
Oh, I see.
What's the reason for your call?
Well, it's been 4 years since I last saw them, and I was thinking I'd like to see my brother and mother soon. When I said that, the man named David made a surprising statement.
Really? You haven't seen them?
What?
I thought you were meeting them regularly.
No, I haven't seen them at all.
I see. Maybe your mother doesn't want to see you.
What?
Actually, when I mentioned your name just now, my wife didn't react at all.
That can't be. Is James not around? I at least want my brother to respond to my call. I was thinking that, but David said,
James is right next to me, but he's just playing a game and not reacting at all. It seems like they've both forgotten about you and adapted to their current lives. They're both living happily. So, could you please leave them alone? I'm gonna hang up now.
With that, David hung up. I was so shocked that I couldn't move for a while after the call ended. I didn't want to believe that my brother and mother had forgotten about me and were living their lives. When I consulted my father, he said,
That's strange. Those two love you, Jessica.
And called my mother. But she told him,
Please don't call again.
and in the end, we couldn't meet or talk to my mother and brother. After that, I became busier with work and couldn't see my brother and mother, and time passed with them still in the back of my mind. Then, about 3 years after that phone call, I received sad news.
What? Mom!
It was a notification that my mother had died in a traffic accident. I rushed to the hospital. In the room where the hospital staff guided me, I saw my mother's lifeless body. Her face looked as if she was just sleeping, with her eyes closed and a gentle expression.
No, Mom!
I hadn't seen my mother in 7 years. I never thought I would meet her again like this.
Sis?
James! As I was mourning my mother's death, my brother came into the room. My brother, whom I hadn't seen in 7 years, had grown up completely.
It's been a long time.
Why didn't you come to see us? What? Did you start hating me and Mom?
Wait a minute. It was your stepfather, David, who told me not to see you.
Dad? Dad would never say something like that.
What?
Dad's an amazing person, and I look up to him. So he wouldn't say something like not meeting with you, sis.
What? My brother seemed to trust our stepfather, David, quite a bit. They must have formed a strong bond over these 7 years. Then, a man who appeared to be David arrived.
Hi. It's our first time meeting in person, isn't it?
Hello. David was a man in his early 50s, with an ambitious look about him, like someone who could really get things done. I've seen various company employees in my work, and somehow he gave me the impression of being a bit cunning.
I'm really shocked that my wife passed away so suddenly.
The funeral will be held soon, so I'd like both you and your father to attend, Jessica. Understood. There were many things on my mind, but the priority was my mother's funeral. My father and I attended my mother's funeral together and saw her off. The funeral went without incident, but there was a dispute over the inheritance.
Jessica hasn't seen my wife in 7 years. So, could you please give up the inheritance?
What? Wait a minute. Wasn't it David who didn't let me see her? As I said that, my brother interrupted.
Sis, are you still saying that? How many times do I have to explain that Dad would never do that?
James, believe me, your stepfather told me not to see you and Mom anymore. He told me to leave you alone. No matter how desperately I pleaded, my brother wouldn't believe me.
Oh dear, it seems I've become the villain here. Dad's not wrong. Sis is just saying weird things.
James.
Sis, I don't really understand inheritance, but will you give it up?
What? I should at least receive the minimum inheritance, right?
What would Mom think if she saw you being so greedy about money?
David treated me as if I were money grubbing. Then my father stepped in.
Wait a minute. My daughter is only claiming her rightful share. Stop making such accusations.
Thanks to my father's words, David closed his mouth.
No matter what you say, I'll make sure my daughter gets at least the minimum inheritance. What's this? Are you and Sis conspiring to make things difficult for us? That's not the case. This is just a claim of rights. The discussion was difficult, and in the end, I was able to receive only the minimum inheritance, but a rift formed between my brother and me. It was because I had become antagonistic with David, my brother's trusted stepfather. I had finally seen my brother after so long, only to be disliked by him. Losing my mother was sad enough, and this made it even harder mentally. And then, more misfortune struck me. My father was diagnosed with cancer. He was given only 1 more year to live. I felt like I was being crushed by repeated misfortunes. Why is this happening to me? I became quite negative. But my father, noticing my change, spoke to me gently. Jessica, everyone dies someday. It's not something we can control. I've been happy living with you all this time, and I intend to enjoy the time I have left to the fullest. Dad. After that, my father and I went on trips and did everything he wanted to do before he passed away. Losing both of my beloved parents was incredibly painful. But my father's last words were, "Look forward and enjoy every moment of life." So I wiped away my tears and chose to move on. My brother came to my father's funeral, but he brought David with him. Because of that, my brother was aggressive towards me, and all he talked about was my father's inheritance. Sis, you forcibly took part of Mom's inheritance, so I'm definitely taking Dad's inheritance. I didn't want to fight or be hostile anymore, so I quietly agreed. Yes, of course. I was planning to give it to you anyway. I said that and made arrangements for the inheritance to be transferred to my brother. I haven't seen my brother since then. He hasn't contacted me, and I felt awkward reaching out to him. A few years passed, and I met Robert through a friend's introduction. He was considering marriage, and I decided to tell him everything. That both my parents were gone, and that I was almost estranged from my only sibling, my brother. Robert listened to everything and still wanted to marry me. I fell in love with him. We continued to date smoothly and received a marriage proposal. This must be what it feels like to be on top of the world. But at the moment, I suddenly received a call from my brother. Hello, James? It's been a while, hasn't it? What's up? Oh, speaking of which, I have something to tell you too. I was so happy to hear from my brother after so long that I started talking rapidly. Then, my brother interrupted me with something incomprehensible. Sis, why didn't you come to Mom's funeral? I never thought you were such a terrible person. What? I didn't think my sister was such a terrible person. I was confused by my brother's sudden accusation over the phone. What's going on? Why are you saying something so nonsensical all of a sudden? Nonsensical? Mom's dead, you know. Wait, James. Calm down. How can I calm down? Was this some kind of cruel joke? No, it was too harsh for that. But there was no hint of lying in my sobbing brother's voice.
I took a deep breath and calmed myself, and spoke slowly to my brother. James, Mom died 5 years ago. Then my brother's shocking reply came.
What are you talking about? Mom didn't die back then.
What? What are you talking about? You saw Mom's body too, didn't you? And we even had the funeral. I couldn't understand why my brother was saying such things.
No. Mom was alive. I lived with her for about 3 years after that.
What? What do you mean?
So I was living with Mom.
I really couldn't understand what my brother was saying. Mom was alive? It's best to go along with the story at times like this.
Yes, but they said she would die soon without an offering. I gave all the money I earned as an offering.
What? At that moment, I realized that my brother had been deceived.
But the offering wasn't enough, and Mom died.
James, can you introduce me to the person you've been making offerings to?
Of course. You should be saved too, sis. That person found where Mom was and rescued her.
James. Later, I went with my brother to meet the person he had been making offerings to. The place was in a regular office building, where counseling was conducted.
If you counsel with the teacher, he'll solve any problem for you.
Teacher? When my brother led me into a private office, David was there. Why are you...
Oh, if it isn't Jessica.
Wait a minute. You're the one who remarried my mother and became James's stepfather, right? Why is James calling you teacher?
James and I have a patient-teacher relationship.
What? No, you lived with James, right? James even called you Dad.
Sis, what are you talking about? David is a counselor. Dad died 3 years ago, remember?
Wait, David, are you brainwashing James?
What are you talking about? I've just been listening to him. Before that, I was counseling his mother.
What? You deceived my mother too?
Sis, don't say such terrible things like deceived.
James!
Jessica seems quite confused. Well, it's understandable. Losing both parents can often lead to mental illness.
What are you talking about?
You've unconsciously put a stopper in your mind to avoid facing reality. You're suppressing the grief of losing your parents. I can help you release it.
Stop it! I'm already looking forward and living my life.
Really? Aren't you just enduring it?
I'm not enduring anything.
It's better not to force yourself. If you do as I say, your heart will feel much lighter.
Really?
Really? James became cheerful that way too. So why not entrust yourself to me?
Yes, please.
Good girl. Now sit here and think about your mom and dad. When I place my hands on your head, the sad feelings will magically disappear. How about it? Do you feel lighter?
No, I don't feel any lighter.
I see. Maybe it's because the offering is 0, so there's not enough power.
What?
If you really want to get better, you have to make a lot of offerings.
Is that so?
Yeah. So let's start with an offering of $1,000.
$1,000?
That's still not enough to be completely healed. You need to make more and more offerings.
Is that so? James made offerings too, right?
Yes, he's been making offerings ever since he graduated from high school and started working. That's how he was able to find his mother and regain happy days. But the offerings stopped at one point, and his mother really died this time. So he's reflecting on that and increasing his offerings to be saved. I see. I called out towards the entrance. That's how it is, Robert. As I said that, the door to the room opened, and my fiancé Robert walked in. Who exactly are you? David asked with a suspicious look at Robert, who then handed David his business card. I'm a lawyer. I've been listening to your conversation, and it seems you've been brainwashing James and swindling a large sum of money from him. A lawyer? He's also my fiancé, and we're gonna sue you and recover the money. As I said that, David momentarily looked flustered, but then snorted and retorted. I thought you'd say something like that. James was saved by me. There's no fact that I deceived him. I was just providing legitimate counseling. Right, James? David asked my brother with a triumphant look on his face. My brother glanced at us and then said, I was deceived by you and forced to contribute a large sum of money. James, you... David's eyes widened at my brother's statement. It seems your brother intends to sue you. Wait, this must be some mistake, right? James, I saved you. Are you going to betray me like this? Teacher, I do think that thanks to you, both my mother and I felt relieved many times. But it's also true that you were gradually brainwashing us, right? In fact, I became unable to make sound judgments because of you. You brought a woman who looked like my mother and made me believe that she was actually alive. And then you instilled fear that she would die if I didn't make offerings. Moreover, you disposed of all the photos of my mother and me without my noticing and replaced them with composite photos of a fake mother. The pictures were so sophisticated and natural that I naturally believed the fake mother was my real mother. And before I knew it, almost all of my salary from the years since I graduated from high school and started working was taken by you. When I met my sister and saw the real photos of my mother, the brainwashing suddenly broke. That's when I decided to sue you, capturing evidence of you actually demanding an exorbitant amount of money. You betrayed me! Don't mess with me. You're the one who kept swindling money from me and my mother. You brainwashed us, telling us not to meet my sister and even made us lie that you were our stepfather. My mother died without seeing my sister for years. I'll not only get back the money you took from me, but also the money you took from my mother. You've sucked money from us and enjoyed yourself. Now suffer misfortune. Ah! My brother angrily confronted David with such intensity that David stumbled back in surprise. Then we'll see you in court, Robert said, and we left the scene. After that, James sued David under Robert's legal representation. David was offered to pay back the total amount of $300,000 that he had swindled from my brother and mother. Not only was David offered to pay compensation, but his outrageous fraudulence became known to his previous patients and their families, and he seems to be in serious trouble due to lawsuits and compensation claims from many people. But he had been doing as he pleased for so long that he deserved to be punished. I realized that our relationship had been strained because of the brainwashing, and with everything resolved, the resentment between my brother and me disappeared. My brother also attended my wedding with Robert. I hadn't seen my brother for many years because of David, but now I want to fill that gap by regularly meeting and getting along well with my only sibling.
I'm Melissa. I've been married for nearly 10 years now, and we're both in our 40s. We don't have any children, and I live with my husband, Cedric. Cedric is 5 years older than me and works an ordinary white-collar job. I have a part-time job as well, so there's a little financial cushion for the two of us. Since getting married, we haven't had any significant arguments, and I think we've been getting along quite well. However, things have started to get a little complicated recently. It all started when I inherited a condo after my father passed away. I've been told to move into that condo and to hand over my childhood home. My father had bought a new 2-bedroom condo when we got married, and he was living there. It's not a huge place, but it's a stylish condo. The condo where Cedric and I live now is my childhood home. I lived with my father and mother in a 4-bedroom condo until I got married, and then my father gave it to me. I left home once to go to college, but coming back after marriage to a home filled with memories was truly joyous. My mother passed away when I was in college, so my father was living alone in the family home. When we were getting married, he said, "How about living in this condo?" I thought he was suggesting moving in together, but he firmly declined. He probably didn't want to interfere with our newlywed life. Then my father passed away. I inherited the 2-bedroom condo where he had been living. Fortunately, I was able to quickly find a tenant and have them sign a lease. I thought our life would continue just as before. But a year passed, and my mother-in-law surprised me with an unexpected proposal during a visit. "Why don't we let Jasmine and her kids live in the 4-bedroom condo you're in? It's getting tight where they are now." Jasmine is Cedric's sister and a single mother raising 3 children. They currently live in a 2-bedroom apartment. The kids were all in elementary school now, and I understood that their place might be tight for a family of 4. However, I had never had a good impression of Jasmine. Every time we met, she looked down on me for not having children. Cedric and I got married just before I turned 30. At that time, she had already tried to outdo me, but it got even worse after I turned 30.
"You're 30 and still don't have a single child?"
"You still don't have children? As a woman, isn't your life over?" Those words were just the beginning. The ultimate insult came when my father passed away.
"You're such a disgrace not letting your father meet his grandchild."
Jasmine is 3 years older than me, but she feels more like a younger sister-in-law than an older sister-in-law. In any case, we were technically family, so I wanted to get along if possible, and I thought I was making an effort. But after hearing those words, I wanted to keep my distance from Jasmine as much as possible. I don't have any siblings, and my only blood-related family was my father. And in the midst of being both mentally and physically exhausted after losing him, she said those words to me without a hint of sympathy. It's impossible not to have a terrible impression after that. I hadn't seen her since shortly after my father passed away, so I never expected such a proposal from my mother-in-law. She says she'll pay the rent. $500 a month. She said this with a look on her face as if to say, "Isn't that a great deal?" I was utterly astonished. Our condo is not that new, but it has been renovated, so the facilities are clean and there are no problems. With good public transport and being adjacent to a mall, if we were to rent it out, the rent would undoubtedly be over $2,000. $500? I don't know if they're unaware of the marketplace or what, but that's a lot of nerve to mention such figure when talking about renting a 4-bedroom condo. Since I didn't say anything, my mother-in-law must have taken it as a confirmation and proceeded with the conversation. "Don't you have a condo that you're renting out now? You two can live there. Just don't renew the lease. You two can move in, and once you're done moving, Jasmine and her family can move in. How many years is the lease?" she said. Cedric, being himself, said, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea. The condo where my father-in-law lived is new and stylish, and it's enough space for the 2 of us to live in." It seemed like the conversation would just keep moving forward on its own, so I asked, "Aren't we supposed to live here together?" In reality, my in-laws live in a single-family home, and now it's just my father-in-law and mother-in-law living there. Cedric and Jasmine's rooms aren't even being used. It seemed like it wouldn't be a problem if Jasmine's family moved in. Rather, if they wanted to move to a larger place, shouldn't they rely on their parents' home before asking us to move? However, it seems that if they move into my in-laws' home, the children will have to transfer schools. They would need to purchase new school uniforms and other things, so they said it would be a waste of money. I couldn't explicitly say no to my mother-in-law about renting the place to Jasmine, but I told her, "This is where I was born and raised. I can't just decide to leave so easily." We left my in-laws' house without saying anything else that day. Considering that my mother-in-law said, "I'm not saying you have to do it right away," she probably hasn't given up at all. When I got back to the condo, I said to Cedric, "This is my family home, you know. How can you agree to leave so easily?" Cedric seemed surprised, like he hadn't even thought I was angry. "Wait, but your family home is a condo," he said. I was truly disappointed with Cedric, who just said that without apologizing. Cedric, who grew up in a single-family home, seems to have a strong impression that a family home must be a standalone house. He doesn't seem to understand how I could consider a condo my family home. Since we were raised in different environments, I suppose it's understandable, but a simple word of apology would have been nice. My anger reached a peak, and I raised my voice. "The condo is my family home. Don't go making decisions about my condo on your own." Cedric seemed displeased when I referred to it as my condo. "What do you mean, your condo? We've been married for 10 years. It's our condo," he shouted back. If he hadn't denied that I think of this condo as my family home, if he hadn't resisted renting it to my sister-in-law, I might not have minded Cedric calling it our condo. But now I couldn't help but feel disgusted when he said our condo. After that, we talked about it many times, but we were still at an impasse. Cedric, who never considered my feelings, called me stingy, stubborn, and malicious. We both refused to give in, and in the end, we couldn't make any decisions or solve anything for several months. All the while, my mother-in-law would contact us, asking, "Have you thought about what we discussed last time?" My mother-in-law and Cedric, who wouldn't support me, were driving me to my limit. Then one day, I got a text from Jasmine, who was finally furious that the matter wasn't progressing. "You don't have kids, so a 2-bedroom condo should be enough. Living with just the 2 of you in a 4-bedroom condo is a luxury. Just move out." I hadn't been in touch with Jasmine since my mother-in-law brought up the condo issue, so this was out of the blue. No polite requests to rent, no pleases, just a command to leave. Who does she think she is? Reading the text from Jasmine, I felt foolish for trying to keep things amicable until now. As we talked, the word divorce crossed my mind again and again. Each time, I tried to suppress my emotions, but I knew I was at the end of my tether. I went to the courthouse and picked up divorce papers, then made a call to a certain place. A few days later, I headed to the county clerk's office. When I obtained the copies of the property deeds, I found that the condo I live in and the one I'm renting out are both in my name. With this confirmation, I decided to give my husband one last chance. "I've told you over and over I really don't want to rent this condo to Jasmine. It's my family home. I just can't bear to rent it to someone who's looked down on me and said awful things. I want you to tell her not to count on this place either." Cedric's face showed clear annoyance. It was always like this when I brought up the subject. In the past, during arguments with Cedric, I told him everything Jasmine had said to me. I thought by telling him, he would understand why I didn't want to rent to Jasmine. But that didn't happen. Cedric even said, "But what Jasmine is saying isn't entirely wrong either." In retrospect, I should have divorced him right then and there. It would have spared me so much distress, but I didn't have the courage to leave someone I'd been with for 10 years, or to be alone as I approached 40. Now it's different. If Cedric rejects my proposal, I'll say goodbye. I had made up my mind, and that was my plea. You hate moving out of your family home that much? You're just tormenting Jasmine because you hate her. It's your fault for acting in a way that invites disdain, and plus you're just exaggerating. It's not like you've been told anything that bad. I can't understand why you can be so spiteful. Unaware of my desperate resolve, Cedric said this with a baffled look on his face. I just couldn't understand Cedric, who never once sided with me, no matter how many times I told him. Perhaps we can never understand each other anymore. Then please fill this out. With those words, I handed him the divorce papers. I thought he might panic or become agitated, but Cedric simply snorted with a smirk when he saw the divorce papers. Come on, what's this about? You think threatening to divorce me will make me back down? Cedric seemed to think I wasn't serious about the divorce. This isn't a threat. I thought I could get along with Jasmine even if she's just my sister-in-law, but now I feel it's impossible. Same with your mother and you. I can't trust you anymore and there's no love left. It's over. Pack your things and leave now. Without knowing how determined I was about the divorce, Cedric laughed. Anger welled within me and I spoke my mind. I wanted him to leave as soon as possible. Jasmine and my mom don't necessarily dislike you. Can't you see this is all your fault because you only think about yourself? Cedric countered. Feeling that this was getting us nowhere, I said, Enough. We can't understand each other anymore. You don't want to understand me, and I don't want to understand you. I can only think of divorce. If you don't sign, I'll file for mediation. I said this coldly. Cedric yelled, Enough already! Kicked the wall and stormed out of the house. He didn't sign the divorce papers or take any of his belongings. It seemed he just wanted to leave the situation behind. Days later, just as I expected, Cedric came back. With a guilty look on his face, he asked, What should I do? Does he think that I'll forgive him if he humbles himself? There's nothing to do at all. Everything's already settled. If you agree to the divorce, sign the divorce papers. If not, I'll file for mediation. Also, I've decided to sell this condo. Yes, I had decided to sell my family home. The day I went to court to get the divorce papers, I contacted my father's friend, Mr. Allen. I had met Mr. Allen several times since I was young, and he was very close to my father. Mr. Allen, who came to my father's memorial service, gave me his business card saying, If you need anything, just ask. His business card listed the name of his law firm. Mr. Allen was a lawyer there. Thanks to Mr. Allen introducing me to a judicial scrivener, I was able to smoothly process my father's inheritance. When I consulted him about this matter, Mr. Allen was supportive, advising me to check the ownership of the condo and giving advice for when the divorce might not be agreed upon. I think that's why I could take a strong stand. After Cedric left the house, I resolved to sell the condo. I contacted a real estate agent and told them I wanted to sell. I informed Mr. Allen that the conversation with Cedric had not gone well, that I could not get him to sign the divorce papers, and that he had left the house without settling anything. I asked for his help if it came to mediation. Cedric, upon hearing that the condo was going up for sale, widened his eyes, and contrary to his previous attitude, let out an intimidating low voice. What? So, you kept saying it's your family home and now you're selling it? So it wasn't that important after all. Then you could have rented it to Jasmine, you stingy woman. Cedric might have lashed out, but I no longer cared what he said. So? I sent him a cold glance. He seemed a bit stiffened, but apparently he wasn't backing down yet. Don't just decide to sell it on your own. The title may be in your name, but when we divorce, there should be a division of property. This condo was our shared property where we lived, right? Facing the defiant Cedric, I smugly said, Too bad. This condo was put in my name by my father just before I got married. Anything I owned before marriage isn't subject to property division. I've already confirmed it with the lawyer. Though it was hard to let go of the family home, I didn't want to increase the bad memories associated with this place by holding on to it. I consulted with Mr. Allen, and once I found out that this condo wouldn't be subject to property division, I was able to decide to sell it right away. Upon learning the truth, Cedric changed his attitude completely, now clinging to me in an unseemly way. I was wrong. I don't need to rent this place to Jasmine. It's your precious family home. Are you sure you want to sell it? Since you're still living here, you haven't sold it yet, right? Let's not sell it and start over here. I'll talk to Jasmine and my mother, so let's not divorce or sell the condo. At this point, I began to wonder why I had been with such a person for 10 years. I was disgusted with myself for having been with him. Don't say nice things now. You never stood by me no matter how many times we talked. It's absolutely impossible for me to start over with you now. Goodbye. Please pack your things and leave as soon as possible. He continued to resist the divorce, so it ended up going to divorce mediation, and I was finally able to part ways with Cedric. Now I am free. I thought being single would be scary, but it's not so bad. I've now purchased a new 2-bedroom condo, and I'm enjoying my life as I please.